So, this all really escalated quickly. It started when Roman Reigns was on the Impulsive podcast this week, or I guess technically last week now. This is what new kayfabe is all about. You would think, and the same thing happened around WrestleMania. So it's not just Triple H's doing, it's an understanding, and maybe Triple H had a lot to do with that too. But it's an understanding of how to tell stories in a way that will actually get the mainstream media interested in covering it. And it means not beating you over the head with the fact that this is clearly a wrestling angle. And if you're going to utilize the fan base of somebody that has a tremendous fan base outside of the world of sports entertainment, you want to actually be able to utilize that fan base by giving them something that doesn't appear to be sports entertainment. You don't want them listening to the show and going, oh, he's doing some dumb wrestling thing on the show now. You want it to just be the show, but whoop, look what I snuck in there. You didn't even realize an angle happened. That's what happened at WrestleMania when Vince McMahon did Pat McAfee's show. It's like a week before it happened, maybe less than a week before it happened. It just gets announced on SmackDown that Vince McMahon is going to be a guest on Pat McAfee's show. And you go, what? What is this? Vince McMahon hasn't done a sit-down interview in Lord knows how long. This is the guy that became famous for smacking papers out of HBO reporters' hands. He can't help himself. He's going to sit down with Pat McAfee. Why is this? And then the rumor mill started. Oh, well, they're going to set up an angle. There's going to be something going on, whether it's with Vince, whether it's with Austin Theory. And you watched, and you were like, okay, when is the wrestling going to start? When is the wrestling going to happen? And you just saw Vince McMahon sit down and do whatever it was, a straight-ahead 90-minute interview. Within the interview, he invited Pat to participate in WrestleMania, but he didn't sit there and go, Pat, I challenge you to a match. No. It was just a straight up, hey, Pat, we'd like for you to participate in a match in WrestleMania. What happened was people reported on this without realizing that they were necessarily reporting on the beginnings of a wrestling angle. Pat's audience sat there and went, you know what? I didn't think I was going to like that, but I did like it. People reporting on the fact that Vince McMahon was doing an interview are not reporting on, I mean, I guess Vince did an interview, but it was really just a wrestling angle. They reported on the fact that Vince did a real interview. And deep inside that interview was the seeds planted for what would become a match at WrestleMania that did eventually lead to Pat and Vince in the ring together at WrestleMania. But it wasn't so straight ahead because this isn't old kayfabe, right? This isn't, Eric Bischoff going on Jay Leno's show and the NWO taking over the Tonight Show. Because if the NWO took over Pat McAfee's show, Pat McAfee's audience would go, this is stupid. I don't watch wrestling and this is why I want the show that I like back. And so how do we utilize that audience without turning them off and having the rest? You want the Pat McAfee to take over wrestling, not the wrestling to take over Pat McAfee. And it's the same thing that happened on Impulsive. If you want to get Impulsive's audience, if you want to get the Logan Paul people and the people who watch Logan Paul to watch what you're doing, you don't have wrestling take over Logan Paul. You have Logan Paul take over wrestling, right? And so you get to the Impulsive podcast and Roman Reigns is on there and they do a straight ahead interview where the first wave of press coming off of the interview is what Roman was saying about John Cena, what Roman was saying about The Rock, what Roman was saying about the opponents he's had in WWE. The focus is just like Roman is on GOAT level and here's what he's talking about. And then at the end of the podcast, a little bit after Roman's out of the room, Logan Paul just drops. If it was my match with Roman, I think it would be my match. If I had a match with Roman, I think that would be my match. What? Are you serious? Yeah, I think so. Anyway, back to the podcast. Blah, blah, blah. And then once that wave of press comes out about what actually happened in the Roman interview, well, Now Roman can say, whoa, you said what after I left the room? Take care of this, wise man. And then Paul Heyman tweets about it. And then Triple H goes, hey, why don't you come to SmackDown? Logan Paul says, say less. And boom, Logan Paul's on SmackDown now. So we get all the benefit of having a superstar appear on this giant platform. And it leads to the beginning of this angle on SmackDown without having to do a full-fledged wrestling angle on a mainstream show. Logan Paul comes to the ring on SmackDown. Roman's not even there. And he goes, what? What? I just want a press conference. What? I just want a press conference. Goes back and forth with Paul Heyman, who's returned at the perfect time for Paul Heyman to return. Knocks out Sami Zayn in a way that only Sami Zayn could pull off. I've got a lot to say about Sami Zayn as we continue on with this conversation. And the press conference is announced the following day, Saturday, in Las Vegas, Nevada. SmackDown was in Anaheim. The Bloodline, Logan Paul, his chums, Triple H, they're all going to jump on a couple of planes. You're not going to put Logan Paul and the Bloodline on the same plane. Are you kidding me? And they're going to head to Vegas. And I don't think they're road tripping either. I think they're taking the short flight. Saturday afternoon comes, live on the WWE's social media and all over the place. The press conference goes down. And I thought it was the perfect sort of blend of kayfabe and reality that's like performance and, I don't want to say legitimacy, performance and reality, I'll say. Because there was a conversation about the amount of eyeballs that Logan Paul brings. Triple H does have the ability to, without saying, hey, this is a performance-based medium, to say, here's why we're doing it, and talk about the business perspective and the real-life perspective of what's going on. And then Logan Paul can come out there and do what Logan Paul does and get people interested. And Roman Reigns can get out there on some truly God-level shit and let the world know that he's on a different level. And the reason that at the media scrum after Clash at the Castle, he only said 2 words, acknowledge me, and then left, was because he chose to, not because he had to. It didn't feel like he was singing a song. It didn't feel like he was playing a role. It felt like Roman Reigns feels like he's the greatest professional wrestler that's ever lived. And I believed that. That when he said that, he believed it. And it felt like he believed it. It's like he came back from COVID and said, look, if you're going to book me in this position where I'm beating everybody, where I'm the guy, I need to acknowledge that. I need to not pretend that's not going on. If I'm going to be able to conquer every foe, I need to let the people know that I see what they see, and I have the ability to conquer every foe. Let's acknowledge it. And that's where acknowledge me comes from. I mean, I think, like, I see, if you watch The Last Dance, there's all these great quotes from Michael Jordan, and that's who Roman Reigns is right now. The questions started coming up, the skepticism as to Logan Paul getting this match. The fact that Logan Paul is getting the Roman Reigns match, the main event match. I think that putting him in the main event is cashing in, number one, on the signing. Because I'm sure they spent a lot of money signing Logan Paul. They're paying a lot of money to get Logan Paul to do a limited amount of dates. So they're getting all their value out of it, which I get. Number two, putting him in the main event in the world title match against Roman Reigns, the most famous wrestler currently actively wrestling right now. I don't think you could deny that. People could argue about whether he's the best or whatever, but I mean, he's certainly the most famous active roster superstar on any roster right now. So you're going to get the most eyeballs possible on what Logan Paul is doing with this guy specifically. But I think the key to what's happening here is that they're actually raising Roman Reigns' stock. If you want to know why this is happening, I think the answer is all in the graphics that came up after the match was announced. That you have Roman on one side and Paul on the other side. And then they put up a poster right away that had Roman's face and Logan Paul's face, and it's Roman and Paul. Why is this happening? Because the last time that we saw a spectacle, that's the word Triple H used, and it's the right word, a spectacle like this, was when we saw Logan Paul versus Floyd Mayweather. Which, yeah, boxing fans were like, this is a joke, which is fine. Because it's a joke that was viewed by a lot of people, that was covered by a lot of people, and that was looked at as a super fight. Because it made so much money. What this does is it's an attempt, I believe, to raise Roman Reigns' stock to get closer to that Floyd Mayweather place. I think that what WWE is trying to do here is that when people discuss the Paul brothers, they discuss Jake Paul, and they go, oh yeah, Tyron Woodley. Oh yeah, Anderson Silva. MMA legends, and he's beating him. And then you got his brother, Logan Paul. He fought Floyd Mayweather. He fought Roman Reigns. Boom. That's what we want. That's exactly it. We want people from outside of wrestling listing Roman Reigns on the list with Anderson Silva and Floyd Mayweather. That's it. That's the beginning, middle, end, I believe, of this thing. That Roman Reigns gets put on the list with Anderson Silva and Floyd Mayweather. You got a guy who people call one of, if not the greatest MMA fighters of all time. You got a guy that people call one of, if not the greatest boxer of all time, at least the greatest defensive boxer of all time. And now you've got a guy that's declaring himself as the greatest professional wrestler of all time. And how does he get put on that list? He literally gets put on that list through Logan Paul. And then the other question is, why now? Why now? The genius of it is, it's happening. Number one, it's not happening at WrestleMania. WrestleMania main events are sacred to a lot of people. It's not a WrestleMania main event. I get that. Perfect. It's happening 7 days after Jake Paul versus Anderson Silva. Which means not only can you blitzkrieg to get press for Roman Reigns versus Logan Paul, but every time the media talks about Jake Paul versus Anderson Silva, they go, and only a week later, Logan Paul is going to be fighting Roman Reigns in Saudi Arabia. Now the story is not look at what Jake Paul is doing with Anderson Silva. It's look at what these Paul brothers are doing. And when people go look at what these Paul brothers are doing, now it means every time they bring up Anderson Silva, WWE gets a little of that action. Every time they bring up Jake Paul, WWE gets a little of that action. Boom, that's why now. The other reason why I think now is a good time for it is you just look at the timeline and where it can go from here. I personally think that Survivor Series as a brand warfare pay-per-view, now that you've got champions that are traveling, now that you've got NXT representation coming up to SmackDown and Raw as part of tournaments and stuff like that, I don't think that the appeal for brand supremacy is there as it once was, especially because you don't even make a big deal of the draft. Like, when you do the draft, it's not like superstars ever have a preference of whether they're going to Raw or SmackDown. It's not like you have a general manager that's picking people for Raw or SmackDown and trying to build a supreme roster. It's just happened. I mean, the Fox robot did it one year. You know, it's not made into a big deal anymore. I think you can go back to a traditional Survivor Series format. And the way Survivor Series has worked in the past is it's not necessarily, I mean, I guess it could be a build-up to what's in the future, but it's also a way to get a little bit more out of whatever hot rivalries you've got going on already. You can't do another rematch, but we can still get a little more out of it, right? So Survivor Series is in November. This is the beginning of October. So we're going to be about 6 weeks out before Survivor Series this is the beginning of November. My mistake. So it'll be about 3 or 4 weeks until Survivor Series. There's already rumors about Jake Paul possibly being in Logan Paul's corner at Crown Jewel. I think that the move to make here is to do Logan Paul versus Roman Reigns. Have that happen. Go to Survivor Series. Survivor Series is the Bloodline versus the Paul family or whatever, or the Paul team Paul, whatever it is. And the Bloodline, you've already got your 5 members. Roman Reigns, the Usos, Jimmy and Jay, Solo Sikoa, and the honorary Us, Sami Zayn, versus Logan Paul, Jake Paul, and then you bring in some baby faces. Ricochet, Madcap Moss, and maybe, I don't know, maybe you throw in Sheamus there to give Sheamus a little love. Up the star power, I think by then, Drew McIntyre is involved with Karrion Kross, and I think you want to keep Drew McIntyre away from Roman Reigns anyway, but go to Survivor Series with that match, and then the final thing is Logan Paul gets entered into the Royal Rumble 2 months after Survivor Series. Logan Paul goes into the Royal Rumble with the intention of going to WrestleMania to get one more match with Roman Reigns. However, something happens in the Royal Rumble, which begins the story of whatever actually takes Logan Paul to WrestleMania, and Roman starts the story of what takes him to WrestleMania. So that's when the paths can split, and who knows? You leave it open for it to continue later. But you got Logan Paul, somebody eliminates him, somebody cheats him, somebody does something. And so now Logan Paul's got to settle that score at WrestleMania. He doesn't win the Royal Rumble, obviously. And Roman can go on to do what I think he should do at WrestleMania, which is fight The Rock on night 1, and then beat The Rock, and then on night 2, fight the winner of the Royal Rumble, Cody Rhodes. So that's why now works for me. I think that probably the best thing Logan Paul said was, no matter what happens here, you're going to get, whatever he said, a show. I'm paraphrasing now. But he said basically one of 2 things is going to happen. I'm either going to get my ass kicked or I'm going to win the WWE Championship. Either way, who's not watching? And that's 100% dead on. That's the beauty of Logan Paul, that there's no reason not to watch. Either you want to see the guy get his face smashed, or you want to see the unthinkable happen and he ends the reign of Roman Reigns. There's no bad result. That's the beauty of it. Now, don't get it twisted. Don't put it out of your head, especially since it's at Crown Jewel. The unthinkable has happened at Crown Jewel before. Saudi Arabia is where The Fiend lost to Goldberg. Okay? Crazy things happen. Logan Paul could definitely win the WWE Universal Undisputed Championship. That could happen. Crazier things have happened, and I know you're sitting there going like, why would they not give Drew his moment only a month later to have Logan Paul beat Roman Reigns? Yeah, you're right. But I'm just saying, that could happen. They're making this the main event. Crazier, way crazier things than that have happened in WWE. We could go off the air with Logan Paul as double champ. That's possible. I don't think that'll happen. I think what we're going to see, and why this is ultimately going to be a good thing, is Roman Reigns is going to smash Logan Paul. And I think it only adds to the mystique of Roman Reigns that now you've got Roman, who, when he's making his list of people that he's destroyed, and that list should be made leading up to WrestleMania, you've got all of the top superstars of today. Drew McIntyre, whoever you want. You've got legends. John Cena, Edge. You've got the unconquerables, Brock Lesnar. You got Daniel Bryan getting stacked up. And you got the guy who's been involved in super fights across the land, Logan Paul. Roman Reigns' terror expands beyond WWE. Roman Reigns' terror expands into the mainstream. There is nobody that can stop Roman Reigns. I think Logan Paul, when you look at it from the perspective of this is a guy who legitimately had a boxing match with Floyd Mayweather and went however many rounds. I say legitimately, you know, it might be a stretch, but it was a boxing match. Exhibition, but a boxing match nonetheless. I think it adds tremendously when you realize that Roman Reigns has murked Logan Paul as well. He does it again in Survivor Series. It's perfect.